They say the fire began with a candle toppled in the dead of night. That's the story whispered in Salem's taverns, a simple accident that reduced a parish of souls to ash. But that's not what happened. No, what happened in 1724 was something far more deliberate and infinitely darker. Imagine, if you will, an entire church, men, women, and children, locked inside as flames licked the wooden beams above. Their screams carried into the sky, but the doors would not open. The one woman who held the key, the widow who had sat in those very pews for decades, stood outside watching, her face lit orange by the inferno. Why would a woman, so long devoted to God and community, strike the match that erased them all? You are not supposed to know this answer, but I will tell you. Because this was not the madness of grief or vengeance. This was an exchange. A pact sealed not with ink but with fire. The widow did not destroy her parish. She offered it. And what she received in return still lingers in the soil of Salem, hidden from those who only know the story of witches burned a generation earlier. You've heard of trials and hangings, but this was worse. For this was not justice. It was worship. And every ember that rose that night was not a tragedy, but a tithe. The first lesson: history does not bury evil. It disguises it, reshapes it, so you never see the true design. The widow's name has been stricken from the town's ledgers, her grave unmarked, as though Salem itself feared to remember her. But traces survive, in letters hidden in the archives of Boston, in half-burned journals sealed by candle wax. In these fragments she emerges, a woman who lost her husband to fever, who prayed for years for relief from poverty, for her barren body to bring forth a child. None came. None answered. Until one night, alone, she heard what she thought was prayer returned. But it was not the voice of her God. The writings tell of a figure at her bedside, cloaked in shadow, whispering promises too precise to dismiss. Wealth, a son, and power over those who had scorned her as a childless widow. But such gifts demanded proof, not of faith but of obedience. And obedience in that tongue was not kneeling. It was sacrifice. Understand this: the systems of control you live under today, church, state, even commerce, are built on the same unspoken trait. You give, they take, and you are promised meaning in return. The widow only pulled back the veil too far. She didn't invent the pact. She revealed it. The night of the fire was not random. The journals speak of a gathering, an ordinary Sunday Mass, where every villager filled the pews. The widow was last to arrive. Witnesses later recalled how she carried no candle, no hymnal, only a small pouch clutched to her chest. Some claimed they saw her sprinkle something into the air as she passed down the aisle. A powder, fine as ash, that shimmered briefly in the light. When the sermon began, she rose, walked to the back, and without a word, sealed the doors with an iron bar. At first they thought she was mad with grief. They banged, they shouted. But when the first flames crawled along the rafters, their panic turned to prayer. And that is when she began to smile. Why do I tell you this with such precision? Because there is a lesson hidden inside. The people burned not only because one widow betrayed them. They burned because they trusted without question. They gave their faith to a system that never once proved itself worthy. And in that blind obedience, they became the very offering she required. The second lesson: when you surrender your will, you are not saved. You are prepared for slaughter. After the fire, Salem was never the same. The ashes of the parish were swept into shallow pits, the land left barren for years. Travelers reported an unease that clung to the air, a heaviness in the lungs as if the smoke had never lifted. But stranger still was the widow's transformation. She was seen weeks later, walking the markets of Boston, veiled but radiant, her hands adorned with rings she had never owned, her carriage driven by a boy with her husband's eyes. Whispers began, She had found wealth, she had found a son, exactly as promised. Yet those who saw her swore the boy never blinked. His stare cut through them, cold, unhuman, as though he was not born but crafted. This is the turning point most historians ignore. They want to reduce her to a madwoman or a murderer. But what if she was neither? What if she was the rare soul who dared accept an offer most of us refuse? And what if the cost she paid was not punishment, but entry into a hierarchy more ancient than Salem itself? The third lesson: evil does not hide in shadows. It parades in daylight, dressed as miracle, crowned as fortune. Only the discerning eye sees the transaction underneath. The deeper you descend into this tale, the more it mirrors the world you live in now. Think, how many institutions around you demand sacrifice cloaked as duty? How many promises of safety or prosperity mask a hunger for obedience? The widow's pact was not unique, it was a smaller copy of the grand design. The same blueprint that drives nations to war, religions to silence dissent, and corporations to bleed generations dry. Salem was not an anomaly. It was a rehearsal, a warning etched in fire. And yet, because truth terrifies, the story was erased. Officials blamed faulty candles, drunken negligence, anything but deliberate sacrifice. The lesson buried with the dead. But tonight, you hear what others were never meant to hear. And it will not leave you unchanged. I ask you now, what would you trade if the voice in the dark offered you everything you ever longed for? Would you look away? Or would you, like the widow, watch as the flames rise and call it devotion? These are not ancient questions. They are the same questions knocking at your own door. The fourth lesson: the pact has never ended. It only wears new masks. What remains most disturbing about the widow's act is not the fire itself, but what followed in the silence after. Survivors? Yes, there were a handful who crawled from the wreckage, spoke of visions in the smoke. They claimed that as the rafters fell, shapes formed above them, neither angel nor demon but something older, with mouths that moved in perfect unison. One girl, her hair burned away, said she heard the voices chant her name, promising escape if she opened her eyes to the truth. She swore she closed them, and when she awoke, she was outside, untouched by flame. Historians dismiss her as delirious, but her testimony was recorded in ink. Why does this matter? Because it reveals something far more terrifying. The widow may not have acted alone. Her fire was not only an offering, but a signal. And something, or someone, answered. Look at how our own world reacts to catastrophe. Who benefits when cities burn, when nations fall? Always, there are those waiting, ready to build something new from the rubble. The lesson is simple. Destruction is not chaos. It is ritual. And the widow was not merely a murderer, but a participant in a larger design. The Boston letters speak of strange gatherings in the months after. Wealthy men invited her into their homes. Clergymen sought her counsel in secret. She had become, overnight, a figure of influence, moving between circles of power that had once ignored her existence. Why would they seek the hand of a woman who had burned her own parish alive? Unless, of course, they recognized in her something they craved. The fire was proof that she had been answered by forces they had only whispered about. They wanted her knowledge, her connection, her proximity to power that did not come from pulpits or crowns. And here is where the tale bends toward us. Because even now, those who sit at the highest tables are not chosen by chance. They are selected, tested, marked by their willingness to sacrifice others for what they desire. Look around you. Every collapse, every war, every necessary tragedy is a fire lit by hands that smile in daylight and plot in darkness. The widow was not banished for her crime. She was welcomed into a hidden fraternity. And this, dear listener, is why her name is erased, because she became one of them. But there was one record too dangerous to erase. A diary found in the ruins of a merchant's house, written by his son, a boy who followed the widow one winter night. He described her walking to the edge of the Charles River, where the ice was split as if by some unseen hand. She knelt, drew symbols in the frost, and the boys swore the water beneath glowed red as if lit from below. From the ice rose the figure of the same sun she paraded through the markets, but this time, the boy noticed, there was no breath in his chest, no warmth in his skin. He watched as the widow embraced him, then whispered words the boy could not understand. The figure vanished into the night mist, leaving her weeping, clutching only air. Does this sound like madness? Or does it sound like a mother's bargain, half fulfilled, half punishing? And here lies the greater terror. She was never fully in control. The gifts she received were not gifts at all, but loans, illusions sustained only by obedience. Break the ritual and they unravel. Tell me, how many people do you know who live exactly like this? Propped up by lies, sustained by appearances, terrified that if the mask falls, everything collapses. This is the point where I must ask you to pause and do something. If you have followed me this far, you are no longer a spectator. You are descending the same path the widow walked. To lock in this transformation, to brand yourself as one who does not turn away, I ask you to comment the phrase, "The fire is the key," twice below. Not once, twice. That repetition marks you. It signals that you are not merely consuming but becoming. It is not for me, it is for you, and for those who will see your words and know you carry the ember of this truth. Understand? Algorithms are also rituals. Platforms are churches. When you write, you are shaping what is allowed to live and what will be buried. Just as Salem's officials buried this story, there are those who wish to bury what you hear tonight. Refuse them. Speak the phrase twice, and know that by doing so you keep the flame alive. Now, let us go deeper still, where the heart of the pact begins to show itself. It is said the widow eventually vanished. Some claim she was stoned by villagers in secret, her body thrown into the sea. Others insist she was carried away in a coach of black horses, never to be seen again. But the most chilling account comes from a ship's log in 1732. A captain recorded a woman boarding under a false name, carrying a chest she would not allow anyone to touch. The crew spoke of strange singing from her cabin, a melody that made them dream of fire and wake in sweat. When the ship reached London, the chest was gone and so was she. The log ends with one final line, "The widow has crossed the sea. The pact now walks among kings." Think about that. Salem was only the seed. The flame carried west to east, then east to throne. And if that is true, then what burned in one small parish did not end, it spread. This is how corruption survives. It does not die with the body. It moves. It adapts. It takes new names, new faces, but the same appetite. The widow is not a story of the past. She is a symbol of how power still feeds today, on obedience, on sacrifice, on the blindness of those who never ask why the doors are locked until it's too late. What you must understand now is that Salem's widow was not erased because she was an anomaly, she was erased because she was a template. Institutions do not allow their secrets to remain in the hands of one person. They absorb, repurpose, and disguise. The church declared the parish fire an accident, then quietly purchased the land and sealed it off. The colony's leaders rewrote their records to omit her name. And those who asked too many questions? They vanished, conveniently struck by illness or removed to distant outposts. Does this sound familiar? Think of how modern tragedies are handled. Official reports polished to perfection, conflicting testimonies buried, survivors dismissed as unstable. The pattern is the same. Control the narrative and you control memory. Control memory and you control reality. Salem was not purged of her story because it was too dark. It was purged because it was too revealing. The fifth lesson: history is not written by victors. It is written by those who fear what would happen if you saw the truth. But what was the truth she uncovered? Why did her sacrifice matter so much that it needed to be hidden? The fragments suggest something few dare to whisper, that the widow's fire opened a doorway. Not to hell in the way preachers describe, but to influence. An overlap between this world and another where voices instruct, advise, and manipulate. These voices are not gods, not demons, but functionaries, enforcers of a system older than nations. They do not care about morality. They care about order, about obedience, about the precision of ritual. When the parish burned, they saw in her the perfect instrument, a human willing to destroy community in exchange for personal power. And once she proved herself, they rewarded her with access. Think of the modern politician who votes for war and rises in rank. Think of the CEO who cuts thousands of jobs and is handed a bonus. The widow was their prototype. Today the system is streamlined, industrialized, disguised beneath contracts and ceremonies you barely notice. But the mechanism has never changed. You give blood, they give status. You give obedience, they give illusion. If you think this sounds too extreme, consider how ritual saturates your life. You rise at the same hour, march to the same tasks, consume the same symbols. Birth certificates, diplomas, licenses, IDs, each stamped and signed, each requiring submission before recognition. These are sacraments of a secular church, binding you not to God but to systems that profit from your compliance. The widow's powder in the parish air, her iron bar across the doors. What is the difference between that and the policies that keep you locked in debt, locked in cycles of obedience? The flames that devoured Salem's church were sudden, violent, undeniable. But the fires that consume you are slower, quieter, easier to ignore. That is the genius of modern control. They don't need to strike the match in front of you. They only need to convince you to hold the candle long enough for it to burn down to your fingers. The sixth lesson: ritual is not ancient. It is present. And the question is not whether you participate, but whether you see the ritual for what it is. There was, however, one man who tried to expose it. Reverend Samuel Carter, a minister from Marblehead, kept a secret ledger of testimonies collected after the fire. He wrote of the survivors' visions, of the widow's strange child, of gatherings in Boston where men swore oaths over bowls of ash. He even sketched the symbols found near the Charles River, symbols that appear today in Masonic lodges, on dollar bills, and in the architecture of capitals. His notes describe a structure, a hierarchy, circles within circles, where sacrifice was not an aberration but a requirement for advancement. He planned to publish them, but the ledger vanished from his study weeks before his death. Officials said thieves took it. Others claimed it was burned with his body. But fragments surfaced decades later in London, bound inside a book of sermons as though hidden by someone who feared their discovery. And here lies the twist. The ledger suggests that Salem was not chosen by accident. It was a testing ground, selected for its fervor, its paranoia, its blind faith. A village primed to burn itself if nudged in the right direction. Do you see the parallel? A society conditioned by fear is the easiest to sacrifice. Now ask yourself this: why are you hearing this story only now? Why was it not taught in school, not whispered in documentaries, not etched into Salem's endless tourist trade? Because you are not supposed to see the widow as a symbol of the system you live under. You are supposed to see her as a villain, a relic, an aberration, so you never suspect the mechanism continues. But once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Look at the fires that rage in our own age. Cities burning, towers falling, wars ignited without reason. Always the story is presented as chaos, accident, madness. Never as ritual. Never as sacrifice. The widow stands at the edge of all these events, her face hidden by time, but her smile still visible in the patterns. And here is the most disturbing thought: perhaps she never vanished at all. Perhaps she lives on through the system she served, her soul bound not to death but to the very machinery of power that feeds on you to this day. The seventh lesson: history is not past. It is present, disguised, and watching to see if you recognize it before the doors lock and the flames begin again. The widow's fire may seem distant, trapped in 1724, but what if I told you that very event became a blueprint? You see, when leaders in Boston studied her, they saw not madness but method. They learned that people do not resist when sacrifice is dressed as salvation. Lock them in a church, promise them heaven, and they will accept the flames. Translate that to empire, and you have the perfect model for governance. Draft men into wars, call it honor, and they march willingly. Starve the poor, call it discipline, and they kneel for scraps. The widow's smile was not just a reflection of her pact. It was the smile of a system that realized human beings will walk into their own destruction if they believe it sanctifies them. This realization did not die with Salem. It crossed oceans, embedded itself in secret societies, and was whispered in courts of kings. Ritual fire became metaphorical fire, but the essence remained the same. Bind the many through belief, elevate the few through sacrifice. The eighth lesson: when you mistake control for salvation, you are already in the fire. Consider how institutions practice this today. Think of how nations justify war. Always, it is dressed in language of protection, liberty, or divine mandate. But beneath the banners and speeches lies the same pattern: bodies offered, communities burned, power concentrated. This is Salem at scale. The widow traded one parish for her desires. Rulers trade entire generations. And just like in Salem, the truth is hidden beneath official records. Reports classified. Witnesses discredited. Survivors silenced. Nothing has changed. Only the stage has grown larger, the flames hotter, the rituals more subtle. You are told these are accidents of history, unfortunate necessities. But look closer. Ritual is never random. Each sacrifice strengthens the hand of those who orchestrate it. Each tragedy is a key, unlocking new levels of control. Remember the phrase you wrote before? The fire is the key. It was not just metaphor. It was a map. And once you see it, you cannot look at the world the same way again. There is another dimension the widow revealed, one more dangerous than the flames themselves: the psychological binding. When the survivors of the fire were questioned, many did not curse her. They prayed for her soul. They believed her act was madness, not malice. Do you understand the weight of that? Even as they clawed from the ashes, their minds clung to the story that she was still one of them, still deserving of mercy. This is the genius of control systems. They teach you to defend your oppressor, to rationalize your suffering, to call betrayal a tragic accident. It is not brute force that enslaves you. It is belief. And belief is harder to burn away than wood or flesh. That is why every regime, every empire, every corporation invests so heavily in symbols, slogans, and rituals. They are not decorations, they are chains for the mind. The widow's greatest weapon was not her torch. It was the parish's trust. The ninth lesson: your prison is not built of stone. It is built of stories. But what if I told you the widow herself may have been a prisoner? Her pact, her smile, her wealth, they may have been nothing more than illusions dangled to bind her as tightly as the villagers she betrayed. Consider her weeping by the Charles River, clutching the boy who vanished like smoke. Was she granted a son, or only the shadow of one, a carrot to ensure obedience? This is the cruelest truth. Even those who sit at the highest tables are not free. They are bound to the very system they serve, rewarded with trinkets, haunted by debts they can never repay. Kings and presidents may bow deeper than peasants. The widow may not have sold her parish. She may have sold herself. And in this, she is no different from the rulers you admire today, figures who appear powerful but who, behind closed doors, obey the same voices that once whispered in a Salem bedroom. The 10th lesson: the pact does not free anyone. It only binds the enslaved more richly. Now we must confront a final revelation before we descend further. The widow's fire was not simply the destruction of a church. It was the consecration of a stage. Salem became a myth, a cautionary tale, repurposed by those in power to distract you with witches and hysteria while the real story smoldered beneath. They want you looking at shadows of broomsticks and spells, not at the system of sacrifice that still feeds today. When you walk the streets of Salem now, you are invited to buy trinkets, tour museums, hear the same recycled tales of trials and hysteria. But none mention the fire of 1724. None mention the widow's pact. Why? Because myths are weapons. Keep the people obsessed with false ghosts, and they will never see the real specter standing behind them. The 11th lesson: history is not erased by accident. It is replaced with something safer, something entertaining, so that you forget the fire ever burned at all. That if you think the widow's fire remained only in Salem, you underestimate how power moves. Fire spreads, and so do ideas. Her act was studied, mimicked, reshaped. Churches across the colonies tightened their control, demanding greater obedience, painting any dissent as dangerous, heretical. Governments too took notes. They learned that fear could unify populations faster than law or reason. They saw how quickly a community could be erased, how easily tragedy could be rewritten. And so, the Widow's Act became more than an atrocity, it became a manual. The manual reads simply, burn a few to command the many. You see it today in different forms. Entire cities reduced to rubble in the name of security. Economic collapses engineered as natural cycles. Pandemics turned into tools of compliance. Different flames, same manual. The widow's match became a torch carried through history, passed from hand to hand, until it no longer looks like fire at all. But it burns you still, quietly, relentlessly. The 12th lesson: every crisis is a classroom, and you are the subject being studied. Now consider religion's role. Salem was steeped in it, drenched in sermons and scripture. Yet it was precisely this blind devotion that made the villagers vulnerable. They trusted authority more than instinct. They prayed while the fire consumed them, believing God would intervene. But God did not. And here lies the cruel mirror. Religion was not destroyed by the widow, it was empowered. For her act proved what leaders had always known. Faith can make people accept anything, even their own death, if framed as divine will. Modern institutions have perfected this. The pulpit is not always a church now. It may be a podium, a television, a glowing screen in your hand. But the function is the same: to tell you what to fear, whom to trust, and why obedience is salvation. This is not spirituality. This is conditioning. And when you kneel before it, you offer yourself willingly to the fire. The 13th lesson: faith without discernment is not devotion, it is submission. But government did not sit idle either. The colonial leaders recognized the usefulness of controlled sacrifice. After all, a people terrified of invisible threats, witches, devils, conspiracies, are easy to command. Fear becomes the currency of obedience. Salem was a laboratory for this psychology. Burn a few and the rest fall in line. You live under the same principle today, only refined. The threats are larger, less tangible: terrorism, climate collapse, disease, war. Each announced with urgency, each requiring you to surrender rights, freedoms, and lives for the greater good. Do not misunderstand me, dangers exist. But the manipulation of those dangers is the true ritual. It is not about protecting you. It is about testing how much you will give, how tightly you can be bound by stories. Salem's widow locked a church and burned it. Modern rulers lock nations and watch them burn. Different scale, same pattern. The 14th lesson: fear is the match, obedience is the tinder, and you are the fuel. And then there is commerce. Do not think it is innocent, separate, or neutral. The widow's bargain was transactional: sacrifice for reward, wealth for obedience. a child for a parish. Commerce operates on the same equation. You sell your hours, your strength, your attention. For what? For scraps of comfort, fleeting illusions of control. Corporations know what the widow knew, that humans will give everything, even their lives, if they believe it will fill the void. Look at how products are sold, always framed as salvation, as the cure to your insufficiency. But each purchase only deepens the hunger. Each trade another step into the fire. The system does not want you satisfied. It wants you bound, eternally bargaining like the widow by the river, clutching smoke where your promise once stood. This is not commerce. This is ritualized sacrifice disguised as transaction. The 15th lesson. When you mistake consumption for fulfillment, you have already surrendered your soul. Why now? You may feel unease crawling beneath your skin. Good. That unease is the signal you are seeing the pattern clearly. Salem was not an isolated tragedy, it was a rehearsal, a performance meant to teach those watching how to perfect control. And they did. Religion, government, commerce, three faces of the same fire, each demanding sacrifice, each rewarding obedience with illusion. And you stand in the same position as the villagers of 1724. The doors are locked. The rafters creak. The flames have not yet touched you, but they are rising. What will you do? Will you pray for deliverance, trusting the very voices that led you here? Or will you see the widow's smile for what it was, a mirror of the system itself, daring you to break free? The 16th lesson. You are not a spectator in this story. You are inside the parish. And the match is already lit. The widow's true genius was not the fire she set, but the fire she left behind in the minds of those who survived. Even stripped of their parish, even staring at the blackened ruins, they carried her act as a warning, shaping their choices long after she vanished. Fear became their leash. And this is how power evolves, from external whips to internal chains. At first, rulers need gallows, prisons, armies. But once you believe deeply enough in their authority, you police yourself. You think their thoughts, you recite their words, you carry their gaze inside your skull. This is the most advanced ritual of all, when the oppressed willingly enforce their own oppression. Do you wake each morning to an alarm not because you want to, but because you must? Do you censor your own speech before a word even leaves your lips? Do you feel guilt when you disobey, even in private? These are the marks of chains you cannot see. The 17th lesson. Once the fire burns into your mind, no walls are necessary. You are your own jailer. The widow's pact offers another mirror. She thought she gained freedom through her bargain, yet she became its most loyal servant. The wealth, the sun, the influence, each was bait. She obeyed more fiercely than those she burned because she believed herself chosen, elevated, untouchable. This psychology has been perfected in the modern age. Today's elites, those perched in high towers, believe they are free, believe their power is self-earned. But behind their luxury they are bound by contracts, rituals, debts, the same voices whispering promises of permanence. They are the widow's children, smiling while they kneel. And here is where the deception deepens. You are made to envy them, to chase their illusion, to mirror their obedience on a smaller scale. The poor sacrifice for survival. The rich sacrifice for illusion. But all are sacrificing. All are burning. The 18th lesson. The pact deceives every hand it touches, from peasant to king, and none escape its hunger. The most chilling part of this system is how it trains you to love your chains. Think of how the widow's parishioners sang hymns as the flames rose. Think of how they prayed, their faith unbroken, even as the smoke stole their lungs. They did not curse God nor her. They clung to the very belief that doomed them. Today you are taught to love your work, to find meaning in endless labor. You are told to serve your nation, to trust the system, to do your part. You decorate your shackles with slogans and call them virtues. You smile as the fire consumes you because you have been convinced it is holy, necessary, inevitable. This is not accident. This is design. The widow's pact is alive not because flames still rise from churches, but because millions carry the same ritual inside them every day, obedient, grateful, blind. The 19th lesson: when you defend your suffering as noble, you are guarding the very fire that devours you. But here is where the descent twists even darker. The widow's act was not only about control. It was about transformation. Fire consumes, yes, but it also purifies. It reshapes what it touches. Those who burned that night became something else. Symbols, offerings, fuel for a system that thrives on turning flesh into meaning. And that is what has always been demanded of you, to become fuel. Your labor, your faith, your life, all transmuted into something you will never touch, a power you will never wield. This is why tragedies are commemorated, why wars are memorialized, why sacrifice is glorified. They are not honoring the dead. They are repurposing them, folding their ashes into the story that keeps the system alive. The 20th lesson: the pact does not end with your death. It feeds on your memory, shaping those who remain into the next obedient flock. Now you may ask, if this is true, why reveal it? Why not remain silent as others have? Because silence is the final ritual, the one that seals obedience across generations. The widow's story was erased because if you saw it, you would begin to question the flames around you now. That is dangerous knowledge. Knowledge that makes men ungovernable, unprofitable, unfit to be sacrificed. And that is why I speak it aloud, to make you see what was hidden, to drag the ember into your hands so you can choose what to do with it. But hear me clearly, once you see, you cannot unsee. Once you understand, you can never again be content with illusion. The 21st lesson: knowledge itself is fire. It will either consume you or it will forge you. The choice is yours, but you must choose before the rafters collapse. The fire has never gone out. It only changed form. In 1724 it burned wood and flesh, but today it burns time, energy, and spirit. Every hour you give to a system that does not love you is another ember. Every fear that silences your truth is another spark. The widow's pact was not her invention. It was a revelation of what already existed. She merely tore the veil, showing openly what the powerful had long concealed. You still kneel at her altar when you clock into a job you despise, when you obey laws designed to choke you, when you repeat mantras that were written for your compliance, not your liberation. Understand this: the fire is no longer outside you. It has been woven into the fabric of your choices. The 22nd lesson: the true pact is not made once. It is renewed daily by you through your silence and submission. Look closer and you'll see the fingerprints of her legacy everywhere. Why do institutions always demand sacrifice? Why must someone bleed for progress, for profit, for patriotism? Why is loss dressed as honor? These are not random traditions. They are modernized flames hidden behind banners, flags, contracts, and creeds. The widow revealed a truth most never grasp. Power is not maintained through reason but through ritual. And ritual always demands blood in one form or another. Think about it: the wars, the disasters, the crises. Each one is followed by ceremonies, speeches, and monuments. They aren't mourning, they are feeding. They are ensuring the fire remains lit. The 23rd lesson: sacrifice is not a cost of the system, it is its currency. Without it, the entire structure collapses. And so, they will always find new ways to make you believe burning is beautiful. But the widow's legacy contains something even more sinister: the invitation. She showed that if you are willing to play the game, if you are willing to sacrifice others, you too can rise. And this is the temptation whispered to every generation: join us. Be one of us. Leave the ash behind and take the flame into your own hands. That whisper has seduced kings, bankers, priests, generals, and even ordinary men who betray their neighbors for a chance at false security. And yet, those who accept it always discover the same truth, just as she did. They are not masters of the fire. They are consumed by it. They believe themselves chosen until the blaze takes them too. The 24th lesson: the pact promises dominion, but what it gives is dependency. The fire does not serve you. It uses you. Now you must confront the question no one wants to ask. Where do you stand in this chain of fire? Do you kneel in obedience, singing hymns while the smoke fills your lungs? Do you envy the powerful, hoping one day you'll climb high enough to wield their flame? Or do you choose the third path, the most dangerous path, the refusal? To refuse is to step outside the ritual, to starve the system of its fuel. But refusal comes at a price. You will be mocked. You will be resisted. You will be cast out, just as the widow was before she made her pact. Yet here lies the paradox. Though they call her damned, she was the only one in Salem who saw the truth clearly. The 25th lesson. Clarity is costly, but it is also the only torch that can light the way out. And so, I turn to you, the one listening in the dark. This story was not entertainment, it was a mirror. You have walked with me through the ashes of Salem, through the psychology of power, through the invisible rituals that govern your life. And now the ember is in your hand. What will you do with it? Will you drop it, forget it, pretend this was just a tale? Or will you carry it forward, burn away the illusions, and see the structures around you for what they are? To lock this truth into your own identity, I ask you now, write in the comments the phrase, "I see the fire." Write it twice. Once for the world you leave behind, and once for the self you are becoming. This is not for the algorithm. This is for you. The 26th lesson. Initiation requires declaration. Declare yourself, and the fire will no longer be their tool, it will be your awakening. The fire was never about Salem. That was only the stage, a theater of smoke and screams meant to mask the deeper truth. Salem was a ritual, a demonstration, a proof of concept. If one woman, desperate and broken, could harness belief and terror to bend an entire community, then imagine what a council, a throne, a government, or a church could do with centuries of practice. And they did. What she revealed in the ashes was not a story but a template. A blueprint for ruling the mind, for binding the spirit, for keeping humanity obedient under the illusion of choice. Look around you. The architecture of her act is everywhere. In the screens that lull you to sleep, in the slogans that disguise chains as freedom, in the endless wars fought not for you but in your name. The 27th lesson. Salem was not an ending, it was a beginning. A prototype. And you are still living inside its smoke. You may think yourself too clever, too educated, too modern to be bound by ancient superstition. But intelligence does not save you. In fact, it enslaves you faster. The widow's brilliance was her ability to twist wisdom into obedience, to weaponize knowledge against those who trusted it. Today it is no different. Science, media, education, each promises clarity, yet each is saturated with the same old fire. You believe because it is labeled fact. You obey because it is written in textbooks. You sacrifice because statistics tell you it is necessary. And still the pattern holds. Fear, ritual, obedience, sacrifice. Your ancestors sang hymns in burning churches. You sign contracts, salute flags, chant slogans. Different words. Same fire. The 28th lesson. Progress is often nothing more than ritual with better branding. Here lies the most dangerous revelation of all. The widow never truly disappeared. Legends whisper she walked into the woods, her body untouched by the flames, her soul sustained by what she had taken. But whether or not she survived is irrelevant. What mattered was survival of the idea. She became a myth, yes, but myths are viruses. They live in silence, infecting those ready to receive them. Every revolution, every massacre, every ritualized tragedy carries her shadow. She is there in the background, laughing softly, reminding those in power of what can be done with fear. And she is there in your choices, too, every time you bend when you know you should not, every time you obey when your blood screams to resist. The 29th lesson. The widow is not gone because she was never just a woman. She was the fire itself. And the fire is still here. So what now? Do you recoil, retreat, pretend this was only a tale told in the dark? That is the safest path, and the system is counting on you to take it. But I ask you to consider something harder, that you were never meant to hear this story, that you were never meant to see the blueprint, never meant to hold the ember. Because once you see, you become dangerous. Dangerous to those who profit from your blindness. Dangerous to those who build monuments on your ashes. Dangerous to those who need your obedience to keep the fire burning. The 30th lesson: your danger is your birthright. To embrace it is to finally step out of the smoke. To deny it is to kneel in the flames until the end. This is where the descent ends, or perhaps where it truly begins. You have walked through the ashes of Salem, through blood pacts and burned churches, through hidden systems that still bind your life. Now you stand at the threshold with one choice: become another ember in their endless fire, or claim the flame as your own. If you choose the second path, you will never again be comfortable, never again be blind. But you will be awake. You will be free. And you will be feared by those who depend on silence. So I leave you with this: if you are ready to carry the ember, subscribe now. Not for me, but for yourself. For every truth they buried, every voice they silenced, every fire they disguised as light. Join this circle, this dangerous remembrance, and write again: I see the fire. I see the fire. Let it be your seal, your declaration, your step into the forbidden. And remember, the widow's flame did not die in 1724. It is here in your hands. Do not let it burn you. Let it burn them.